Hello everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to apply vector normalization in your multi-criteria decision-making problem. Here we have the same problem that we solved in linear normalization approach. So we are going to just apply the vector normalization and we are going to see how it works. So first, again, we have to find out whether it's a beneficial criteria or a non-beneficial criteria. For example, here we can again see that the price is the non-beneficial criteria and all others are beneficial criteria, right? So that we for sure understand by now, right? So now, again, for vector normalization, we have two different equations for the beneficial and the non-beneficial criteria, okay? So let me just write it here. So here we are going to apply vector normalization. And when we have beneficial criteria, then our equation is that the normalized values, which we can indicate by xij prime or bar. So here we are saying that, okay, the rating of alternative I under criteria j, it should be something like this. We'll have the value of xij, so the value of the rating under criteria j, and we are going to divide it by a square root of, we also have to start a summation symbol here. So here then we are going to say I equals to 1 to, we can say up to n, or here we see 3 alternatives, so we could just have written 3, but it's okay, we can use n and that is fine. And square root of the summation of xi and j square, okay? So we will take the values of all the alternatives, the rating of all the alternatives for a particular criteria, square it and take the summation of that. So that's the approach we are going to follow here, okay? And let me just write the equation for non-beneficial, which is more or less the same equation actually. So again, we are going to have xij prime, and here we are going to have 1 minus the same thing, okay? So xij, and then we are going to have a square root, and we start a summation symbol, I equals to 1 up to n, and here we are going to have xij square, okay? So these are the two equations that we are going to follow to apply the vector normalization. So again, what I'm going to do is just simply copy this whole part and I'm just going to paste it here, and here I'm going to say vector normalized solution, okay? And I'm just keeping it like this. And I'm going to remove these values here because this is where we will apply the normalization and all other multiplications and calculations are going to be the same, right? So here, first we are going to apply the vector normalization to the quality criteria. And to do that, what we're going to do is we are simply going to select this value, and this value has to be divided by the square root. So I'm going to take the sqrt and then start a bracket, okay? The square root of this value square plus the next value square plus the next value square, okay? And we were adding it, so this is this adding it, the plus of the square values, this indicates this summation symbol, okay? So we did, for the same criteria, we did the summation of the ratings of the all three alternatives, okay? So that's it, and we should fix these values in the denominator so that when we drag it, it's no problem, okay? Great, and then I'm just going to drag it. And just to double check, if I click here, I see, okay, this value f3 is divided by the square root of the summation of the same three values, okay? Great. Now comes the price. Price is again the non-beneficial criteria, and here it's slightly different. We have to start with 1 minus, and then I'm going to start with a bracket, okay? and then I'm going to select this value, and this value has to be then divided by the SQRT of this value itself plus also this value, square of this value, plus the square of this value. Okay, and again we are going to fix them using the command F4 in my computer. It could be slightly different if you are using a Mac, or you can manually put the dollar symbols before D and before 4. Okay, so that's mainly it, and I'm going to enter, and this is the value that I'm getting, and I'm going to just drag it, and then I'm going to double check the value, and it looks all in place, right? Then the other criteria, they are all the beneficial criteria, so it's a bit simpler. We just don't have to use the 1 minus thing, right? So here is the value, and it is going to divide it by the SQRT. You have to remember not to forget the square root. Okay, this is something we tend to forget time to time, so you have to remember not to forget it. Okay, and again fixing these values. Great, and enter, and then we just drag it. Okay, and here I'm just going to double check it. So it was F5 divided by the square root of the square of summation and the square of all the scores under that criteria for the 3 alternatives. Now again, to do some shortcut, I'm just going to drag it, and then I'm just going to update these values here, the row numbers. I'm going to make it 6, and also this one should be also 6, and also this one should be also 6. Here it should be 7, right? The row numbers for the denominator, it should be 7. And here it should be, the row number for the denominator, it should be 8, right? And then I'm just going to select these 3 and drag it on the right side. And also I'm going to select all of them and just to reduce to 3 decimal points, because it looks nicer and easier for us to follow, right? Great, that is our solution. Here we have the average, okay, without considering the weights, just the normalized values. Here we have the vector normalized values of the ratings and just the average of that. And here we see that iPhone is actually the best one, okay, and then we have the Samsung, and then we have Nokia. But then here is the solution where we consider the weights, right? So here these values, yeah, they are multiplied with the respective weights, right? Yeah, here you can change to the weight here, but the weight is the same weight here and here, so it's not really affecting the solution. Okay, so now here you see, after applying the vector normalization, interestingly our solution changes a little bit. Nokia becomes our first choice, and then Samsung, okay, and then comes the iPhone. So one thing is constant here, that is the iPhone is the least preferred alternative when we are considering the weight and normalization, whether we are considering the linear normalization or the vector normalization. So after considering the weight and normalization, iPhone becomes the least preferred alternative. Okay. On the other hand, in the linear normalization, Samsung was the first choice, and just with little bit difference, Nokia was the second choice. And the vector normalization, Nokia becomes the first choice, and with very small deviation, the Samsung is the second best choice. Okay. So the first sense, again, they've changed a little bit in whether we choose vector normalization or linear normalization, right? So now you may ask whether we should use vector normalization or linear normalization in our research paper or in our thesis, right? So here, what I normally recommend is that you first apply the linear normalization in your study, because that is often the most simple to apply and the most meaningful actually. So that's what we recommend, that's what I recommend, that you apply the linear normalization. But sometimes what I have done in some of my studies is that I have also created a section in the paper where I say robustness check. So in the robustness check, I also apply and report the results of vector normalization approach. And often I see that the first 1-2 criteria and the normal overall ranking of all the criteria or the alternatives, they don't change much whether we use vector normalization or linear normalization. So I kind of use the vector normalization as a robustness check tool. So which I would also recommend you. So if you have time and energy, do vector normalization for robustness check of your results. Okay. So that's all for this lecture now. I hope you can now apply vector normalization in your research and your thesis or articles. And thank you for watching. If you have any queries, feel free to reach me. Bye-bye.